I think the most masculine thing that you can do is make people better that are around you. So what's the best thing to make people better at is how they feel about themselves and about the world. Did I make that person better? Did I make them feel more inspired or more impacted or more thoughtful, or did I challenge them in a way to think differently about life? Did they feel cared for? Like I've heard people saying like, men are just hardwired as like protector, provider. And I'm like, well, like emotionally, what am I providing then? Like emotionally, what am I protecting? And how am I doing that for other people? That is masculinity.
Welcome to 3%. We're your hosts, Jamie Haig.
And I'm Blake Roberts.
We're two best friends, fathers, husbands, and just two guys trying to figure it out.
We're also therapists, which is probably a pretty important part.
That's true.
And we believe that at our best, people are 97% honest with themselves and others. And it's that hidden 3% of emotions, needs, desires, and behaviors that we keep to ourselves that keep us bound to shame and loneliness, from which many of our issues stem.
Each week on this podcast, we'll interview leaders in the fields of psychology, theology, arts, and athletics to explore holistic masculinity. We're not here to tell you the man you need to be, but we are here to help you explore what gets in the way of being the man you want to be.
We're going to help you develop courage and give you the tools to share your 3% in the relationships that matter most, so you can more deeply connect with yourself, God, and others. So, pull up a chair.
Let's get into it.
So let's be honest. Let's be honest. Let's be honest.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 3%. We are really excited today to get to talk to Zach. He is the founder of a really neat and impactful, we'll let him call it what it's called, but brand, project, nonprofit that is all centered around making mental health resources accessible. And one of the things that we love particularly about Scatterjoy is I don't think we've shared this yet on the show, but this wasn't like the founding idea for 3%, but one of our initial ideas was we both like apparel, particularly like apparel that's cool. And this is not a diss on anybody, but we were kind of realizing like in the mental health space, a lot of the apparel is not, I'll just say our style, for not wanting to be mean and call it
cheesy often.
Okay, cheesy. Yeah, that's what I was trying not to say for some reason. So anyways, we were like, how cool would it be to have really like neat apparel that guys would wear that isn't cheesy, but that could start like really cool conversations if somebody saw it and was like, oh, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. And apparently there's already somebody in Ohio doing just that. And so we don't
way
need
better
to.
Than we could have hoped to do it.
But Scatterjoy is a nonprofit rooted in storytelling to impact the stories of others. They call themselves a creative mental health company. And like I said, they have apparel, mental health resources, and a pretty great following on social media where they produce really high quality media with the whole goal being to make mental health care accessible and affordable for all. And so we're really excited to talk to Zach today. He's a husband, he's a dad, he's got his own journey in mental health. So it's like a perfect guest for the show. And I think, not to be cheesy, but I think you're going to probably walk away from this episode feeling a little bit more joyful.
Okay, wow. Buckle up.
That's what I've like walked into. I'm like I'm the Scatterjoy guy now. And so yeah, it's one of those things. If I don't come into a space like with joy, people are like, "What's wrong, dude?
Are you okay?
Are you okay?" No,
that's interesting. Yeah,
I appreciate you guys having me on. It's really fun. Yeah, Scatterjoy has been a really fun project. Yeah, it's all those things that you said, and I feel like more. And it keeps evolving. It's just like one big experiment where we keep like throwing spaghetti at the wall and saying like, okay, what's going to stick? What's going to be cool? What are people going to relate to? What feels good and honest and true to us? And yeah, it's the whole goal of like making mental health care and the conversations of mental health more approachable, more accessible, resources more affordable. All the things that we feel like are barriers in the world of mental health, especially for men. Yeah. So yeah, it's really cool. Thanks for providing me with the platform to have this convo. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're really excited. I'm curious, as much as you want to get into it, like what inspired you to create Scatterjoy?
Yeah, I personally always struggled with mental health. I was diagnosed with a anxiety disorder when I was in 7th grade.
Hmm.
And so like very early on as a kid, really trying to wrestle with this idea of like something's wrong with me, or like placing my identity in my anxiety and saying like I am anxious instead of like it just being something that I have or something that I feel sometimes. And
Yeah.
so I think it's one of those things that really like I didn't have language or skills to walk through that space at the time and didn't really have people around me to do that either. I mean, my family loved me and still does. It's nothing against them, but they didn't have the language or I think like the practice to help me guide through that. And so like really my story just is immersed with just personal struggle and trying to fight in silence. Like I don't think any of my friends growing up knew that I was struggling that bad. And you know, I was the kid in high school that was supposed to be like this like, you know, smart, fun jock that is like crying in high school bathrooms because I'm so overwhelmed with like the emotion of everything and these feelings of inadequacy and things like that. And so it's always been a part of my story and continues to be. You know, it's like, it's funny. It's like I run a mental health nonprofit and, you know, I still struggle some days. So
Yeah.
it's like, you know, I think like mental health is one of those things that you never like graduate from, you know, it's like always a part of you. And I think like sometimes we still as a society and as a community and a culture, like really put this like end product or this like end of the journey and saying like, I conquered my mental health. It's like, no, you didn't. Like we've kind of been sucked into this trap of like the American dream of like, I have this goal to do this thing or overcome this thing and then I accomplish it and then I move on to the next thing. Mental health isn't that, you know, it's like this constantly revolving aspect of your health that you're always going to have to manage and deal with and surround yourself with really good people and resources and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just always been there and it always will be, you know?
Yeah.
It is interesting that we're more than okay with saying like, here's all these resources for you to work on your physical health. Here's a new thing for you to try as a workout strategy. And nobody ever feels like, oh man, I reached my physical goal this year. I'm good for the rest of time. And with our mental health, we're like, okay, I no longer experience as many depressive symptoms. I'm probably good for the rest of time. I know that even I've felt that way about my own story. It's like, oh, I dealt with that part. So that's good. That won't come back up.
Yeah, even grief is an interesting one too, where people think like, okay, I went through the steps of grieving, now I'm done. Like I won't grieve this thing or this person or this idea or dream that I had ever again. And it's like there's always going to be some sort of like reminder that comes back up that's gonna like trigger a feeling or a thought or an emotion in you. And then I think anytime that does happen, when we've been sucked into the belief that grief can be something that you like finally officially move past, we then shame ourselves and saying like, oh man, like I guess I'm not past it. Like, gosh, this is the worst. Like I'm the worst. Or you start to attach like identity to accomplishing things within your mental health journey. And that's just not the case. Like it's interesting, like even thinking back to when I was diagnosed in 7th grade, it was really surrounded by a time of grief for me. Like my uncle had just passed away from a sudden cardiac arrest. You know, he was playing tennis on a lunch break with a colleague and collapsed, and they tried to rush him to the hospital, and he was gone. And so it's like, you know, a hero of mine at the time, and still is to this day, like, you know, just is gone from your life and from the rest of your story and everyone else's in the family. And then, you know, again, it's like, I don't have the language, I don't have the skill set. Everyone around me is also grieving at the same time. And so it's like, you can't really judge them for not being supportive in the best way for me as possible, because it's like they needed it too. And so I think it's one of those things, like grief kind of like triggered this expansive experience with my mental health and still has. It's like long story short, and I mean, maybe long story long after you hear this, but struggling with mental health and grieving that with my uncle, and kind of always trying to like grow up to be like him. I played college baseball and I graduate and I finish my career, and then I find out that I have a life-threatening heart condition, like him too.
Is it SVRC? Is that what it was called?
AVRC.
AVRC. What does that stand for?
Arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy. So
Yeah,
Okay.
ADC sounds better.
lots of letters in there.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, it was one of those things. I found out that I had that, and it's a hereditary thing, and it's the same thing that killed my uncle. And I have a defibrillator implanted when I was 23, and within the first 3 months, it went off and saved me from going into cardiac arrest 3 times. And so it's like then you have those moments again where you're like, okay, this is very real for me again. I'm grieving the person that I thought that I was going to be, or I'm grieving the body or this health that I thought that I was always going to have at a very young age, especially like being an athlete. And, I was studying, I actually was getting like my undergrad and my master's in applied exercise science. I thought that was like the trajectory in my life, like solely based around this like idea of physical health. And then myself am getting diagnosed with this heart condition, this heart disease. And so it's like, you're like grieving it all over again. And so that's what I mean by it's like this grief thing and this mental health thing is like, it's constantly cyclical. It's like you're never going to fully like come out of it and graduate from it. And I think when we do understand that and grasp that, and I don't think we fully understand it until we've been through some tough stuff, I think it takes some of that to really understand it and be connected to it. But I don't think we ever graduate it. Like it's always going to continuously come back. And in some ways, I think like you accept that, but also some ways you celebrate it, because like scattered joy doesn't exist without that part of my story and my past and the feelings that I've wrestled with too, or the people that surrounded me when I needed the support that I got. And so like things don't exist without the pain of it too.
So beautifully said. Yeah, 3% doesn't exist without us going through some stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks for sharing that and being vulnerable with your story. There's lots of voices today saying what anxiety is, what it isn't. One of the things that just like stuck with me when I was going through grad school was a professor said that anxiety is like impaired fear. And there's something of that I like when thinking about anxiety. And it reminded me of this story that you're talking about with your uncle dying when you were that young and then being diagnosed with the anxiety disorder. Like it is, if impaired fear in that definition is like unprocessed fear, or let's just say like not a great relationship with your own fear, like it is so developmentally, not even developmentally appropriate, but just appropriate to be like afraid of death.
Right.
In 7th grade, not even if somebody close to you dies, but just like you're expanding and you're becoming more intimate with the realities of life. And then you have an experience like that is so like disorienting. And I don't know how people like engaged your fear in that, but like that would create so much fear. Even just like I don't know if I'm getting too into the weeds, but even just being able to grieve the fear that like you're becoming more aware of the reality of life, and it's not as innocent as you once thought it was. Like that, there's grief even in that, right? So that's like really nuanced for people to be like attuned to, but I think it does show the importance of how important it is to be attuned to, especially our kids, like when they're young and they're developing and going through all this stuff, like all of the vast landscape of like our emotional experience, especially going through things like that.
Yeah. I think for me, it's interesting, like what you said about just like supporting even kids through this. It's like, I think about my kids right now, and I never want them to feel like fear is a bad thing. you know, like I want to honor that as much as I can. And I think that's something that I believed when I was a kid. And I still do to some degree. Like sometimes when I'm like really scared, I'm just like, oh, this is like, there's, to me at that age, it was like, there is such things as negative emotions. Now, as I've like matured and grown and obviously immersed myself in the world of like social emotional learning and emotional intelligence and, you know, the world of Mark Brackett and all that stuff, it's like, you understand that like there really is no such thing as a negative emotion. You know, it's like they're there to like help teach us and guide us. And it's like, you know, it's one of my favorite like meditations that I do is like seeing the feelings that I have as like friends that are coming to visit. And it's like, oh, hey, like, welcome in. Like, what are you teaching me? What can I learn from this? All these different things. And so I think that's something that our society and culture has done a really bad job of, is saying like, well, no, you're not allowed to be afraid. You're not allowed to be sad. You're not allowed to be scared. You're not allowed to be angry, depending on like who you are and the demographic that you're, you know, it's like, we're not allowed to be so many things, but like as human beings, we are all of those things. Like we have to feel those things or we're like suppressing those and then they're going to show up in our lives in different places. And so that's just something that I've always struggled with when I was growing up and still do to some degree. Like I kind of feel myself like tapping back into that, you know, a little bit in certain circumstances. And then even becoming a dad, I think the coolest thing about being a father is like you basically are reparenting yourself to some degree. You're like, oh no, like I see so much of myself and my reactions and my quirks and different things in Cooper and Archie, and I get to like hopefully catch myself in those moments. I don't bat 1,000 in this, but get to like just honor them and the space and the feelings that they're feeling and sit with them and not try to rush it.
Yeah, and even like the gift that you have leaning into that work. We were talking to another guy. His name's David Thomas. He runs a therapy practice here in Nashville and has a podcast called Raising Boys and Girls. And I was saying to him, similarly, like, I don't think our gift as dads who are leaning into this work is necessarily that we're going to do it perfectly. Certainly not. I think our greatest gift as dads who are leaning into this is that we have now the ability to apologize where we recognize that we missed the mark, where we didn't bat 1,000, and that the repair of that might be more important and model something more helpful than if we had just nailed it the first try. Yeah. And presented this model of like perfection that as a kid, I probably would have felt like I'll never be that good of a dad. If just perfection was modeled to me.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like even in where guilt and shame show up in my life now the most is when I don't get it right as a dad. You know, I hold myself to like such a high standard and expectation of myself to do everything right and perfect. And so what you're saying is like so spot on for me right now as a reminder to be like, hey, no, like the gift in it is like the repair afterwards, like the vulnerability that you show up in and seeing that as the example, not like this perfection, this like, you know, I'm not like, I try so hard to show up as like a Buddha to my kids, you know what I'm saying? Like, but there is those moments of anger, man, and triggering for me. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's that. I'm glad you said that because it's like if there's like 3 or 4 things I feel like I'm always coming back to in sessions. One thing that I always come back to is the repair is always more important than the rupture, and because the rupture is inevitable. If the rupture is like a disconnect, and as I'm thinking about this in the context of being a parent, it's like the repair, because I always have clients they'll like come in and describe a rupture. Maybe they don't call it that, but they're describing it and they're like, I want to just figure out how this cannot happen again. And it's like, well, if we're starting there, it's kind of like we're already not starting off at a helpful place because it's inevitably going to happen. And so it's like, what if we shift our focus more to acknowledging and being aware of when the rupture happens and then pursuing repair? Because it's not like what you're talking about, Zach. It's not even just the repair doesn't just help your kid feel seen or like their emotions cared for, but it also models for them, I don't have to be perfect with my emotions either. Like if dad like flies off the handle or like dismisses me or whatever, and he's doing like you're saying, he's doing enough of his own work of acknowledging and working through his guilt and shame to then and then he comes back and says, "Hey bud, I'm like, sorry, dad was really scared. He didn't know it, but dad was really scared and it came off this way and that probably hurt you. Like, let's talk about that." Like a kid's not consciously thinking about all of that, but like their body is experiencing it. And that totally changes the game for not only your relationship with them, but them going, okay, I don't have to try to be perfect with my feelings either, because
and not only that, but like, hey, I just saw my dad engage with his emotion and process through it imperfectly. So you're also modeling like a lot of emotional health. A lot of the work that we're trying to do is not only not, it's okay to be imperfect, but in your imperfection, can you then come back to the thing, process through it, understand what was going on with you, and seek repair through it and maybe not around it. Like, man, I noticed I was angry. I'm sorry I was angry. But like, hey, I noticed I was angry. I sent this text to my brother this morning about my anger and said, my control is how I keep myself safe from trusting others to take care of me. When I try trusting them and they act imperfectly, that part of me is proven correct in its worry about not having control. And it's very unhelpful. Well, guess where that shows up the most? With my son. Because when I trust him to try to do something that I've asked him to do, turns out he's still 3.5.
Right.
And he's going to do it imperfectly. And then that part of me just rages because it's like, man, you're not taking care of me. Well, guess what? Not his job to take care of me. My job to take care of him. So then when I can come back and repair with him, it always has to come back for me of like, why am I getting so upset right now? Because I'm at a 10 and my son's just trying to brush his teeth.
Yep. Man, I feel that deeply.
Yeah, ridiculous.
I have a question for you, Zach. Why, I don't think you've said this yet since we've been talking, but why the name Scatter Joy?
Oh, yeah. So it was 2020. Myself and my wife were struggling like the rest of the world in the midst of the pandemic. And we had just had our daughter, Cooper. And I started to feel certain emotions and was struggling with my mental health a little bit, just with like all the changes and this like once in a lifetime disaster and thing that we were going through. And really dove back into poetry for me, like reading. I grew up, as an athlete in a town where it felt like, it was never like overtly said, but it felt like it was like, hey, you're either an athlete or you're an artist.
Yes.
Or you're a nerd or like a geek or smart or whatever. It's like, these are the buckets that you can exist in. And I was like, wow, I think I'm like all of those guys. Like, I think I'm like, I love academics and I love learning and I love literature and art and sketching and I love sports. Like, can I be all of those things? And I think I felt that very early on where I was just like, okay, like high school, just athlete, get good enough grades where I can get like a scholarship or something like that. And so it's like, I lost that like creative, like, I think searching and longing, in my life at that point. And it kind of like started to come back as I graduated grad school and started to wrestle with like this disaster in my own life with my heart condition. Well, like 2020, I dove back into Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he has a book called The Conduct of Life that was written in like 1860. Oh, wow. And so it's like, I actually have like an original copy. Like I bought an original copy after we launched Scatter Joy. But there's a quote in that book that says, there's no beautifier of a form, complexion, or behavior like the wish to scatter joy and not pain around us. And something about that quote, like every time I say it, I get goosebumps. And
wait, can you say it one more time?
Yeah, a little bit slower.
Yeah, there's no beautifier of a complex. Wait, I just like forgot the quote. There's no beautifier. There's no beautifier of a complexion, form, or behavior, like the wish to scatter joy and not pain around us.
Oh my goodness.
Dang.
And so for some reason, like scatter joy, I think in the season of life that I was in with everything that was going on, like that quote just like hit me like a ton of bricks, and I get goosebumps even like saying it or trying to say it again. I didn't know what it was going to be. You know, at that time I was on staff at a church here in Columbus. I was also traveling and speaking before then. I was also writing before then. And so I didn't know if it was going to be like a blog post series or a new keynote or something different. I even just like went to like customink.com and was like, hey, I'm just going to throw Scatter Joy on a t-shirt. I hit up Oxford Pennant.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love their stuff.
And I was just like, hey guys, like I just want this for like an office like banner, like kind of like sitting behind me. And I was like, just put Scatter Joy on something, keep it black and white, like you guys do whatever. And they sent me back the mock-up and I was like, that's cool, like that's great. And I bought it and got it delivered. My wife was like, what the heck is this? Like what? And what are we going to do with this? And I was like, I don't know, I just think it's cool. And so we sat on it for a year and didn't really know what it was going to be. And yeah, it turns out it's like all those things and more, you know? So
Wow.
I think one thing that we really wanted it to do is like, for me, I just wanted it to be a motto that I lived by, like a reminder for myself of like, hey, what are you bringing to this situation? And can you live this out? And I think like that's what we want it to be for so many people. It's not just like an organization that has resources, but it's this constant like declaration and reminder of like how we want to like live our lives and exist in the world. So yeah, Scatter Joy, Ralph Waldo Emerson.
That's such a cool origin story.
Yeah, that's sick.
I love that. Like, just started as a pennant for your office, and now look at what it's turned into.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't even create the branding. Oxford Pennant created like
Really?
Yeah, I didn't even send them a design. I was just
It's
like,
just the
hey.
words.
Yeah, and they sent it back, and I was like, that's cool.
That's
and
awesome.
so then so like Oxford Pennant did our branding for us.
I didn't realize how. I mean, I had an idea of how perfect of a guest he'd be for 3%, but like, I don't know what you've seen of ours, but like our 4 categories of sort of like people that we're interviewing for the show are leaders in the fields of theology, psychology, so mental health, the arts, creativity, and sports. And look, we've got a 4-in-1 right here,
Ding, 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 ding.
which is so crazy because like we both were collegiate athletes and musician and photographer. Like, there's something about the beauty of being able to accept all of those parts of you as a man and not compartmentalize them and be like, I can only be I related a lot to what you were saying of like, I could point back to specific years, like these 2 years I was the jock, and these 2 years I was the skater, and these 2 years I was the drummer in the worship band, and like now getting to a place of being able to accept all of those is really
doing
neat.
whichever one of those things would allow me to be the most liked at the time.
Oh yeah. It's like I think we have a longing to just want to be accepted into whatever we can be, and so it's like you kind of like pick and choose the avenues to do that. Yeah, so there's a degree to that for sure.
Zach, how did you go from going back to grad school doing grad assistant and coaching baseball to working at a church and writing and speaking?
Yeah, I've lived a lot of different lives, and honestly, like I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, it all made sense, but at the time it didn't really. It was, to me, when I first went into school, I thought I was going to be an elementary teacher. And so like the first 2 years of my schooling, 3 years of my schooling in college was because of that. I went to Cleveland State. I went to a junior college, played baseball. Then I transferred to Cleveland State, and then they cut the baseball program my first year there, my junior year.
Oh, what a bummer.
And so then I transferred to a D2 university just an hour north of Columbus here called Ashland University, and played my senior year there. Credits got messed up, and then I kind of jumped into exercise science because I'd taken enough science classes and stuff. So to be honest, like the jump to exercise science was like, oh, I can still graduate roughly on time and thought like, I'm just going to be a baseball coach anyway, or like a teacher anyway. I can still do that to some extent, like with this degree. And then when I had my diagnosis for the heart condition, the heart disease, it was right after I graduated my undergrad, and the coach asked me to come back as a graduate assistant. And so for me, it was like, because I had moved around so much because of like transferring to the Cleveland State and then transferring to Ashland, it was like some sort of stability of like, oh, I can stay in the same place for a longer period of time right now. And then also I was in heavy grief mode and needed to be around people that like I had already established relationships with there. And so I stayed there for 2 years and graduated with kinesiology, exercise science, and then moved to Columbus and was at a private K through 12 school doing all their strength and conditioning. I was a athletic assistant administrator, and I was teaching some like servant leadership classes and stuff and running their like student athlete leadership program. And I was there for 4 years, and around like year 3, I kind of started feeling this pull to like coach people in a different way. A lot of the work that I did was like, the label of it was physical health and sports performance, but like the deep work that I loved doing was like the emotional work with athletes and like the servant leadership and the social emotional learning. And so I kind of jumped all into that world and was traveling and speaking for an organization called Character Strong that does like social emotional curriculum for schools nationwide. And then through that, got asked to come on staff at the church, and I was a next generation director because like, just like they saw the skill set and they saw like the background of me working with youth and all those things. And I was a member at that church for a really long time prior to that. And then out of church, it was like feeling this like pull towards Scatter Joy. It was like, a lot of Scatter Joy exists because of things that I didn't see happening within like church circles in my community, where it was like, okay, we have thousands of people coming to church on a regular basis on a weekend, and we're only referring people to a handful of therapists that are all Christian therapists too. Like something, and I didn't grow up in the church at all either. Like I wasn't baptized till I was 24 or 25. And so,
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I have an interesting viewpoint just around like what we were doing from a mental health standpoint, like to really care for people. And so a lot of like what Scatter Joy is like in response of like kind of what I've seen and felt and experienced like in my own life, but then also in like my professional lives in all those different buckets, like being an administrator at a school and seeing like students struggle with it and seeing teachers struggle with it, traveling and speaking, talking to people across the country, and then working at a church where it's like you're developing these deep rooted connections with people, but only being able to support them so much without the ability or the, I think maybe the acceptance of like being able to connect them with maybe some resources that they might need and benefit from. So yeah, it's all, I mean, so many different hats. And but yeah,
It's
looking
pretty
back,
beautifully
it kinda makes
woven
sense.
though.
Yeah, I hope so.
It's amazing as you're talking, like Blake's already said, I didn't know how perfect of a guest you would be until we're talking about it. And now it's like both of our wives work as youth pastors in the Nashville area. And both of us grew up in the church. And I wouldn't say part of the heart of this came out of our current experience of church.
No, my current experience of church has been very redemptive. Lots of other pain and harm before then.
Both of us experienced a lot of harm in the church in different ways. And I think what part of the 3% goal was to give people what we felt we lacked in our experience in the church, and what we ended up finding in what we both call a sacred experience in 12-step recovery, which was like this version of honesty and support that we didn't understand why it didn't translate to where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting hearing you say that a lot of what you're doing with Scatter Joy is built out of a place of what you didn't see happening there as well. It feels very aligned.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like, I think what makes Scatter Joy unique is it's an answer to what is absent in a lot of places. Like, it's not just like what I experienced at the church. It was like, at the school, it's in our society and culture, And so I think what's interesting, and I've said this before, is like, you as an entrepreneur or a person trying to seek impact and meaning in the world and purpose, like, you create what you wish you had.
Yeah.
And so, it's closely tied with, like, Brad Montague is a speaker and travels and is an artist and does a lot of things with, like, young kids and stuff. He's amazing. But he always says, like, be the person that you needed when you were younger. And so it's the same thing from an essence of, like, what you guys are doing. It's like 3% is like you're creating what you wish you had and experienced, because if you experienced it, then there's a handful of other people that are, like, hungry and longing for the answer that you guys can provide in this. And so I think that's what makes these conversations so beautiful. It's like, if I needed them at that time, like, someone else needs it right now. Has to be.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah, I love how it's coming out in Scatterjoy now with offering, like, okay, this is a really hard and scary step to go find mental health resources. Well, guess what? We have a way to connect you to a therapist or other resources. Come here and we'll help you find those things. Well, now money is a barrier to entry for you. Guess what? We have a way to help you with that. It just feels like you're solving a lot of barriers to entry that then require somebody to engage with. Were those even the barrier to entry in the first place?
Yeah. We wanted to. I don't think we're ever going to be able to, like, remove those barriers. Like, I think they're going to exist to some extent always. When we were first thinking about Scatterjoy and what it could be, we asked ourselves, like, what actually gets in the way of people getting help? And so I think the 3 pillars that we created were, like, stigma, accessibility, and affordability. And so it's rooted in, like, awareness, accessibility, and affordability. And there's a lot of organizations that are doing those things. And it would be naive for us or anyone to say, like, we're the ones that are going to solve it. Like, no, we can do our part to help people, like, jump over those hurdles. Like, we can reach down to them and pull them up. But we never wanted to be an organization or a brand that just created awareness, because if awareness was the solution to the mental health crisis, we wouldn't have a crisis right now. Awareness,
That's a clip.
awareness increasing.
Very well said.
Yeah, awareness increasing is also side by side with, like, the statistics that are increasing.
Yeah.
And so it's like that isn't the solution. Like, we need to have people pulling people from awareness to action. And so we can't just stay stuck in awareness and say, like, hey, we're creating conversations. Like, we need to either partner with organizations or be the organization that tries to do that too. And so we started with apparel because, it was the easiest way for us to raise awareness and to raise money for the resources that we wanted to have. And, within the first year, we were able to fund and partner with a crisis text line. And then we have the Find Help Network, which is people can search for free and reduced cost care. And then last year, we were able to launch the therapy fund, which we try to open up twice a year, depending on fundraising and stuff like that, and help people if, like, finances are a burden. But yeah, it's like we never want to just, like, create cool things and have people stay at awareness. Like, there always needs to be this invitation into something different. And if you know what is getting in the way for people, then you can kind of, like, help pull people in that direction even more efficiently, And so for us, it's like Scatterjoy looks the way it does, functions the way it does. It's rooted in storytelling the way it is because I personally think, like, medical branding and traditional nonprofit branding actually increases the stigma. It
100%.
did for me. It was like, I know I need help with my mental health. Where can I go? What are the organizations that are, like, coming up on Google search? And then I click on those and I'm just like, ooh, doctor's office, like, vibes.
Not
like,
approachable.
It doesn't feel
warm.
Doesn't feel great to me. It feels like, very sterile, and it feels like something's wrong with me. Like, that's what it communicates, like, in my psyche. And so for someone to, like, come to, like, Scatterjoy and say, like, oh, like, I see myself in this. Like, I see every part of myself in this. And then that's what we talk about. Like, when we say, like, this is approachable for people, like, come to an event where there's artists like doing a singer-songwriter aspect, sharing their story, and leave with a card that has all of our resources on it that you might not access, but you might give it to a friend. And so it's like,
It's beautiful.
you might be the one that needs help. You might also just become an advocate for other people in the community. And so yeah, it's unique in that way, I think.
Yeah, you do any consulting? Man, it's so good. It's so much of like, we just, I think some of our listeners know this, but just because it'd be a funny thing for you to know, when we went to our first ever retreat together, we knew we wanted to do something together, because both being entrepreneurial and friends and whatever. And we thought it was going to be like a branding, design agency, marketing agency for therapists, because most of therapists, even in private practice or nonprofits or whatever, marketing, website, language, all of that is exactly what you said. Very sterile, very non-approachable, very confusing. And it's like, you're already in a place, if you're reaching out for those resources, where like you can't do much more work. So we were like, let's try to change that. And then it became very clear to us very quick that that's not where our heart is, although it is sort of, because we're trying to do that same thing now, but for men in this way.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that. Yeah, we were down at South by Southwest in Austin last year, and we set up an experience down there, and it was pretty amazing, because it was just like this practice of repetition of like storytelling behind like the brand and the organization and the impact that we try to create. And so we would have a lot of people coming up. Like, we usually, when we set up different places, we have like the huge like 3x5 foot Scatterjoy banner that we first ordered in 2020 from Oxford
Nice.
Pennant. And then we have like another little flag that says for mental health. And that's the one that gets people. They're like, wait, okay. And then they come up and they're like, what is this? Like, what's Scatterjoy? And we always say as a team, like, we're actually a mental health nonprofit. We don't look like one. Let me tell you why. And so,
Dude, that's so cool.
yeah. And so it's like, we always want to lead with that and saying like, okay, like, we're glad that you're asking why we're different. Like, let me tell you why we're different. And let me tell you, let me like reiterate like why you are even approaching us in the interest that you are.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like there's just something about it. There's something about Scatterjoy too. I think it just jumps off the website or the page or the Instagram or the banner for people the same way it did for me. There's magic in those two words, because
Totally.
you know, it's like who doesn't want to experience joy in their life? You know, it's like that is the goal.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and then also scatter's just, it's an interesting word too, because it's like very unintentional. Like I picture someone just like throwing seed anywhere. And I think it's interesting. I've thought about this, and like why it's so magical to me, at least, is because in my life, like I've always thought like hope and joy and kindness and love and patience and like all these really great, like, I don't, if you want to get like spiritual, like fruit of the spirit, like even though they're like abundant in our lives, like I still feel like limited resources depending on the day. And I think like when we think about like giving them away just like freely and to anyone, it's very intentionally unintentional. Like that is the way that I should live my life. Like I should treat like and try to inspire and instill hope and joy and kindness and patience and love and all these different things into anyone I see, not be selective with it. And I think like that's what we've gotten in trouble with over the years, is like we're selective with love, like we're selective with kindness, we're selective with niceness and even patience. Like we're selective with that based on the relationship that we have with that person. Doesn't everyone deserve that?
Yeah.
And so it's something that is just like, it's so rooted in what we try to do as an organization and stuff. So I love that word.
Yeah, even as you say it, like the magical feeling of it to me is not only do I want to experience joy, but I would love to be someone who just unintentionally scatters joy.
Yeah.
I would love to be someone who it's just like, yeah, like you said, throwing seed, like I'm going around and this is what's naturally pouring off of me. That feels...
Yeah. Like that's the goal. Like that's how
Yeah.
I think that's how I want to be remembered hopefully,
Yeah.
is like someone that just like, it wasn't fake. It was just like the way I lived my life was in such a way that when people left me, they were like, there was something different about that or him, or like what was going on. It's funny. It's like, every Earth Day, it's coming up here this month. I don't know when this is going to air or not, but every Earth Day, it's April 22nd, and we do a specialty t-shirt that has the theme "Scatter Joy, See What Grows." And so I just love that because it's like, it's, like, see what happens, like live your life in this way, see what happens around you, see what happens within you. And the designs are always just so insane.
Yeah.
Man, if there's anything, there's so much that I want to remember from this conversation, but that idea of scattering joy unintentionally and not being so choosy of joy and all the other fruits that you mentioned, not being so choosy of who I extend that to is, there's something in me, in my body that's like, I want that. I want to be that person. And for me, I've done a lot of forcing those things over my life, but it's like the more that I do this deep inner work that we've been talking about on this show and even in this episode, it's like the more that I do that work, the more that it naturally flows out of me in this more scattered way and not this forced, at times fake way.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
maybe it's waiting to flow and we're removing the barriers as we do the deeper work. Because we focus a lot on like pursuing holistic masculinity on this show, Zach, and I think that can feel pretty ambiguous. And so even practically, as we're talking about wanting to be someone who scatters joy, I think if somebody's listening and you're like, okay, that sounds nice as an aspiration, but how do we get there? Or what's the point? How is that masculine? I feel like that's going to what joy looks like is going to look different from person to person, and how we end up there is going to look different from person to person. But the point of doing the mental health work is so that you can remove the barriers to being whatever conduit of joy you can be to the people around you.
Yeah, 100%. I think the most masculine thing that you can do is to make people better that are around you, and so to me, it's like, what's the best thing to make people better at is how they feel about themselves and about the world.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, that to me, like that's how I define masculinity for me. It's like, did I make that person better? Did I make them feel more inspired or more impacted or more thoughtful, or did I challenge them in a way to think differently about life? And so did they feel cared for? I think that is like, it's like interesting. It's like I've heard people define it, and pastors and, speakers and presenters of saying like, men are just hardwired as like protector, provider. And I'm like, well, like emotionally, what am I providing then? Like emotionally, what am I protecting? And how am I doing that for other people? Like that is masculinity. And so it's like, if you want to go that way and say like masculinity and men are supposed to be those things in life, then you also have to attribute like the emotional side of our humanness to that too, and say like, I am a provider in that way as well. Yes. And so, and it's funny, it's like even thinking about, when we were talking about like scatter joy or like living life in that way, I always think of it like from an imagery standpoint. And it's like, I think we often think of ourselves as like, we kind of put ourselves in God's shoes sometimes. And we think like we're like these godly figures, like walking earth, and we have like all this power and stuff. I'm more of a faucet, like I'm a faucet. God's like turned the water on. And in my hardest times in life, I've like reached up and tried to turn it back off, because I'm thinking, God, like this, like I'm going to burn out. I'm not enough. Like and he's just like, just leave the tap on, like, just let it flow out of you. And so I think it's like, it's less work for me, because I'm just like living, I'm a faucet. Like I'm a vehicle for him to like pour through me. And I think where I get myself in trouble is thinking like that it's my power, it's like, it's not like I'm here. I'm a mirror. I'm a faucet. I'm a vehicle for him to do that work. So
that's beautiful. I freaking love that.
Mm-hmm.
Zach, man, I think I kind of want to start to end this way. I would love to hear from somebody who's not a therapist, for our listeners. I realize I'm ending. Is there anything else you wanted to say or ask first?
Well, I just want to make sure when we're wrapping up that people know how to support
That's the
him.
second, that's the second part of my
Cool.
question. I just was like, I was just like,
You're
we just
nailing
started
it. Just
descending,
crush
and
it, dude.
I didn't say, all right, everybody, buckle up. Okay. We have pulled in the, okay, whatever. So one, from a non-therapist, what is like one piece of advice that you would give to somebody for how they can, I don't know, like step toward improving their mental health, however you would phrase that. And then the second part of it would be how can our listeners support Scatter Joy? And then maybe part B of number 2 would be how can they be supported by Scatter Joy?
Yeah, it's top of mind right now, just because we just wrote something about it and sent out an email and newsletter about this too. But I think to improve your mental health is to improve your capacity to practice empathy for yourself and for other people. It's interesting right now. Empathy is kind of being dragged through the mud a little bit, and people are saying that like it's toxic and it's weaponized and it's for the weak and empathy's evil. Like there's this weird narrative going around with empathy right now. And for me to like think about like from a believer standpoint, to think about like the life of Jesus, I think that was his biggest superpower. Like that was his biggest like supernatural thing that he was able to gift us with. I think it's part of our hardwiring as humans is to be able to like relate with other people and to suffer with them, to celebrate with them, to understand what they're going through and who they are. And so for me, it's like the two biggest ways that we can increase empathy is through story and through travel. And so if you want to, it's very simple to me, and it may not be right, but it's right for me. I think for me to increase my empathy, it's been this amazing experience of like traveling with my family and taking my kids cool places, but then also just to read, to like get back into reading. And my wife is like, I stay stuck in like the self-help world of literature and reading and spirituality and philosophy and stuff. And my wife recently has like opened my eyes and urged me and encouraged me to start reading fiction rather than like just watching TV shows and movies all the time, but to read stories and to be able to like imagine the story in my mind and what they're feeling and what they're going through and the hurdles and the pain that they're facing and the joy that they're experiencing. I think like that is a superpower that God has given us, and we have to practice that. And part of it's like two-sided. It's like, you know, can you have empathy for yourself and your own story and your own emotions and not judge yourself as much as we tend to do? And then also, like, I think you become better at practicing empathy and compassion for yourself when you get better at doing it for others. And I think that's a lot of like the pain that we experience is staying like so centralized and me focused in our own world. And I think our lives would get a lot better if we took our eyes off of ourselves every now and again and lived a more outward facing life and tried to gain that skill set. So I would say that it's really simple. Yeah. Watch meaningful TV shows, watch meaningful movies, read meaningful books that are going to increase your skill set to be a more empathetic person. And I think the world becomes a better place.
That's good.
Sorry, what was the second question?
Second one. No, yeah, you're good. That was beautiful. Second question would be, how can our listeners support Scatter Joy? How can they be supported by Scatter Joy?
Yeah, it's kind of like two pathways into the organization. It's if you need to find help or you want to be of help. So if you need to find help, you can go to our website. We have a Find Help page. It's the scatterjoyproject.com. You can click the Find Help button right there on the homepage, and we have access to what we call our Find Help Network, which is a nationwide search engine that connects people to free and reduced cost care. You type in a keyword like therapy, group therapy, support groups, addiction services, anxiety, depression, counselor, and then your zip code, and it's automatically going to populate all the free and reduced cost programs and facilities and providers that are in your area. Yeah, a really cool tool. And then we also have information about our therapy fund as well. So if you are struggling with that as a barrier of financial assistance or the financial burden of paying for therapy, then you can apply for assistance there. And we try to help as many people as we can with that. But we also have a crisis text line. We also link to other nonprofit or mental health organizations on that page too. So if we can't be of help and if our services aren't what you're looking for, then we want to make sure that you get the help you need. And so we list other organizations on there as well. We're not stingy with how we're helping people. We want you to just get help. And so, but then we also, like on that website too, you can donate. We have something called the Society, which is actually a monthly membership. So if people donate $10, $25, $50 a month, there's some personal perks in that too. We send out a personal like Society newsletter. We send like a welcome package. People that donate $25 a month, they get a free t-shirt. People that donate $50 a month, they get to choose like a seasonal t-shirt for free. So that's cool. It's a really cool thing that we're trying to do. And then just buy the merch. 100% of the profits pour back into the nonprofit and all that stuff. And so
you're going to want to buy the merch.
Yep.
Yeah. If you haven't seen the merch yet, the second you see the merch, you're going to want to buy the merch.
Just go look at it, then you'll buy it.
Yeah, we have we're really excited for Mental Health Awareness Month. Our theme this year is we're kind of robbing it from a poem, and it says joy is a form of resistance. And so we'll have that on some apparel in May, and that'll directly support our
I was
resources.
literally just pulling up your page. Is that the one that you guys shared photos of recently?
We didn't. We have one in stock right now that's the tagline on that, and the design is there's joy in the journey.
Oh, that's the one I'm thinking of. This one.
And then
so cool.
We did one recently that said like the artist will save us. So we treat it more as like an online boutique where like, we'll introduce new designs and colorways and different things like that. Get them while you can. When they sell out, they sell out. We'll just kind of reintroduce some more stuff. And then, that Earth Day t-shirt's coming out soon. So
Love it.
And support in that
so
way.
Good.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All those links will be in the show notes.
Yeah. Man, Zach, I'm even more thrilled now having talked to you than I was when we knew we were going to get to talk to you. It just feels like you are someone who, from a little ways away, we are now just really cheering you on, praying for the success of Scatter Joy. We'll be supporting. We're just really thankful for you, thankful for the beautiful thread that has led to you helping so many others. And we hope to continue this friendship with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Kindred spirits for sure.
Yes.
Felt that from the moment we started talking. I appreciate you guys for having me on.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's awesome. Well, everybody, we're glad you're here. Keep coming back. You're worth it.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode. Listen, we're working on some really practical resources to help you connect more deeply with yourself and others. So if you head over to our website, 3percentco.com, you can learn more about that. The link will be in the show notes. And this is the part of the show where we ask you for some help. Listen, we don't have a big fancy production team. We're recording these in my therapy office in between sessions and in the margins of our life. We just really believe in the message that much. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and rarely would I take the time to review and rate a show, just because honestly, I forgot. It wasn't until we started doing this show that I realized doing that actually really does help these platforms notice our show and get the word out. And so if any of this is impactful to you, we would love it if you took a second to leave us a review, rate us, or if you want to just do it the old-fashioned way, text this link to a friend and say, hey, let's talk about this episode. Whatever you do, make sure to follow us on whatever platform you're listening to so you never miss an episode. We're really grateful you're here, and we'll see you next week.
So let's be honest.